Adoption of the agenda. Can we have a motion to approve the agenda? And there it is on the board.
Make a motion to approve the agenda, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Tucker, a second?
Second.
Second for Mr. Gardner. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
if I may, I'd like to make an amendment to the agenda, if I could. On item number 3, where you see new business discussion / approval of engineering and permitting for Central South Carolina mega site,
Yeah.
my amendment is that no expenditure for engineering and permitting for the Central Carolina mega site be considered for approval unless the actual proposal and option is in the agenda packet and listed for consideration on the agenda.
Very good. Is there an exigent circumstance for you to change it?
I'm asking for, I made a motion, Mr. Chairman, and there's no discussion.
As a chairman, I'm authorized to make a ruling that if there's an exigent circumstance, we can accept the motion. Is there an exigent
Point of order. Mr. DuBose, I've made a motion to make an amendment, and the chairman has interjected before we've had a second.
Well, just clarification, you just want to remove that? Is that what you want?
Correct. What I want to remove on under number 3, new business, I want to remove the approval, and I'm going to, Mr. DuBose, bear with me. You see that agenda there where it says E? You see where E is under new business? Right below it, number 3, discussion / approval. We have no disclosure to the public. We have nothing in our agenda packet. What are we going to go and vote on?
So my question here is there an exigent, we'll just follow through the questions, Mr. Jones. Is there an exigent circumstance? And as I'm reading back now to make sure, I'm just trying to understand. I'm not trying to stop your process.
Sure.
But under our rules, there are 2 rules. To change the agenda, it has to be an exigent circumstance, and it has to have a 2/3 vote. So let's get to the first test and see if there's an exigent circumstance. As I understand it, it's your recommendation to remove it, but because there's no public record of this. It was not in the agenda package. Is that what you're saying?
Mr. Chairman, we have an item on the agenda that there's no disclosure. There's no information. And this council could be spending $1 to $1.2 million on this issue, and it hasn't even been disclosed to the public. And I'm a little appalled by that, to be honest with you.
Well, I will take a moment to explain that these are contractual issues, and we're going to go into executive session, as I explained to you before the meeting, and because of these contractual issues.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, if I may, you said we were going to go into executive session and come out and take a vote, and I have nothing in my packet. There's been, this council deserves information on what we're going to vote on. This community, these folks deserve information on what we're going to vote on, and I just can't believe that we're having this discussion right now, to be honest with you.
Well, I think I've explained it to you, but if I'm willing to put this to a vote, Mr. Jones, because I think the discussion might help further make everybody understand there is no attempt to hide anything. Let's go. Is there a second for Mr. Jones' motion to remove this from the agenda?
Mr. Jones, let me ask you one question. I'm gonna give
No, is there a second or not? And then we'll get into discussion. Yes. So we have a second. Now, Mr. Jones, please go ahead and lead us in discussion.
Let me say this, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Bozar, and thank you, members of the County Council, for allowing me this moment. Bear with me. First off, I want to say that I am now and have been in favor of an option on the mega site. Mr. Chairman, I've got the floor.
No, wait a minute. No, you don't. Let me make sure. I want to make sure our lawyer is listening, and here's the reason, everybody. Here's the reason, and I'm gonna be very firm about this. We have a contractual issue, 2 contractual issues that we need to go in executive session on this topic, and any discussion of that needs to be guided by our attorney so as not to compromise what is very sensitive. And I assure you, everything will be known. But we are in a contractual issue right now.
Mr. Chairman.
So I asked I asked the attorney, okay. Mr. Jones, you don't have the gavel here. I'm asking the attorney, can we proceed with this in discussion of option and so on? Is that okay?
The motion, yeah, Mr. Chairman, you can call for a vote on the motion.
Right. let's go ahead and call for a vote. With that, all those in favor of removing the item from the agenda?
First?
No, we're not. We're going to do a vote. I'm calling the question.
Mr. Chairman, you're
That's what the
absolutely
chairman.
trying
That's
to
what the
shut
chairman
me down.
does.
That
But
is
I'm gonna call a
censorship,
vote.
Mr. Chairman.
All those in favor, raise your hand. There's no one in favor. The motion dies. Now we'll move on to
Wait
the
a minute,
next
wait a
item.
minute, wait a minute.
We move, Mr.
Would you, point of order, would you clarify what he got wrong just now, please, Mr. DeBose?
Mr. Jones, you made a motion to amend the agenda.
Correct.
To amend the agenda, add something to the agenda.
Or take it
To
off.
take it off.
Well, if it's just been to take it off, the motion would have just been to delete it.
That's what I said.
But, well, amend, delete. I think we're parsing words. But just as the chairman said, I don't know how council can vote, but he called for a vote. If council denies this, honestly, that's not the end of the story. If the motion gets on the floor, you can make a motion to amend it. He's
right.
Just as a preliminary ruling, saying that we're going to leave it on the agenda, Mr. Jones, until we get to the agenda, then we're going to have an executive session, and then, honestly, your motion can be remade if this gets on the floor.
Exactly.
You can make the motion again. That's all the chairman's saying.
Exactly.
Well, we took a vote for my motion to stay on the floor.
All the chairman's saying, as I understand it, in all due respect, Mr. Jones, is that it's premature at this time because it's not an emergency. And when we get to the agenda, the chairman's ruling is that he wants to vote on it. When we get to the agenda, the chairman says you can go into executive session if council has to vote on that. But then when he comes out, the way I understand the chairman, he's not saying you can't renew your motion at that time.
Exactly correct. And so the time for discussion is an executive session.
How did
And
the vote go, Mr. Chairman?
I've made the ruling, and I'm going to make
I understand,
the vote.
but I want to ask a question.
No,
I'm going to ask this question, or we'll continue all night. Okay. You asked how many opposed me having a discussion here tonight, and I didn't see a show of hands.
Well, that wasn't the motion.
Point of order. No, you asked. You asked.
No, the motion is on the floor to amend the agenda by deleting that item. And I have ruled that there's not an emergency to remove it, given that we have an executive session to follow. And secondly, we have a second. So we're at the point now, instead of discussing the issue, we're at the point of I call the question, and I now give you the option to vote. And with that, I call the question.
Mr. Chairman,
Satisfied on parliamentary
you called the option to vote and would not even let me present my position.
Correct. That is correct.
That is censorship, sir.
That is because of the contractual matter. And we'll
Listen, I was going to say nothing that would have violated any contractual matter. Y'all had it put on the agenda to vote and approve. You've got no supporting documentation in this packet for us to come out and vote on. What you're going to do is you're going to go in executive session, you're going to come out, you're going to take a vote, and you're going to spend $1 million.
Okay, well, that's it. We call the question. All those in favor, raise your hand. No one raised their hand.
All in favor of what, sir?
All those opposed to amending the agenda by deleting this item, raise your hand.
Opposed to?
All those opposed to Mr. Jones'
And letting me speak,
amendment.
Mr. Tucker, that's what you're opposing. Vote against me, but let me speak.
You'll get an opportunity to. You've raised this question to confuse me. All in favor to his motion is what we're voting on?
That's correct.
Okay.
So all those in favor of his motion, no one raised their hand, not even the person who made the vote.
Mr. Chairman, because I'm not going to agree with your process.
So then all those in favor, opposed to that amendment, raise your hand. And that's Mr. Tucker, Mr. Snodgrass, Mr. Gardner, Mr. Bozard, and Mr. Connell. The motion fails.
Mr. Chairman,
Now,
thank
all
you
those
so
in
much.
favor-
Thank you, members of council, for hiding this issue.
Mr. Jones, you will be respectful in here. There's not hiding because...
Mr. Chairman, I'm being very
Now we
respectful.
move to the agenda. All those in favor of the agenda signify by raising your hand.